do not know so how many ways you can actually use your just simple rubber band. There is no one or two ways to use it, but so many different possibilities out there. Right? It's like this exercise is like, last week I spoke to you about what does it mean, and I said you go home and whenever you are stuck with some issues, whenever you are stuck with any kind of project, whenever you are stuck with one or two things, and instead of asking yourself, what should I do under the circumstance, you ask yourself, what could I do under the circumstance? And then limitations, the potentials will just open up. Right? There's no one or two ways to do things. Right? There's no one way to two ways to reimagine what could be possible in a given circumstance and given rules, or given issues and given items and objects. You can do a whole lot of things. What can you do with your shoe? Let me ask you. What can you do? Shoes is what? For walking. Yeah, you wear and walking. What other things can you do with your shoes? Doorstop, you can use it. Doorstop, what other can you do? Kill spider with that. You gotta have an imagination. What could I do instead of what should the shoes be like? You could use it as a work of art. In Toronto, there's a shoe museum there. Have you been there?
Yeah.
It's beautiful. My dad was very, very imaginative with his shoes because he used it as a disciplinary tool. Because whenever we didn't listen and we know that it's he's gonna somehow will give a discipline and what we do, we just run away and then he would just take off his shoes and just throw it to us. And, you miss me? There are so many different ways to use a given subject, given object, given circumstance. A lot of times we get stuck because we keep on asking ourselves, what should I do? Because there's only one or two ways whenever we say, what should this be supposed to be? Right? And I gave you some examples last Sunday as well. Church building. Church building is supposed to be what? Place of worship, right? And then, not much after that. So what happened was that once we cleaned our church building and it was an empty sanctuary, and I walked in there and I said, wow, this is, and it just, the potential is so limitless. And I said, this could be a dance hall. Began to think. This could be a place of worship, but this could be a dance hall. This place could be what? Whole different possibilities. What could be possible? Instead of what should it supposed to be? Right? We keep on asking this, and then we get stuck. Right? We get stuck in any given project. If you have any issues in relationships, if you have some issues and you get stuck in project, we keep on. What happens is that we think about black and white, right? See, this should be this way. Church should be like this, and then we can't. It's just totally black and white. This way or that way, one way or the other way, outside and inside. Your Tim Hortons and Starbucks. I mean, there are all different ways, but it's just black and white. And so, whole exercise is all about just opening up the possibilities and limitless. Imagination is our limitation. And so we can use this. We can reframe how we embrace and live out our biblical teachings and commandments. So last several Sundays I've been speaking about 10 Commandments of Moses, and then some of the biblical commands, how to embrace and live out the 10 Commandments, especially. The challenge for us is that it's been written like over 3,000 years ago. It's like it's been given, imparted to that very specific group of people. To about 3,000 years, more than 3,000 years ago, and far away from where we are. So how do you embrace and live out that? The command, the rules, and that's been given to the very specific group of people. So there's a challenge of bridging the gap, closing the gap, a cultural gap, there's a historical gap, there's a geographical gap. How do you bridge it? Now that's our challenge, isn't it, to live out and embrace. And some of the people were saying, well, the gap is too huge, too big a gap to bridge, so what they do is they just throw them away. Right? They just, we reject them and we throw it away, you don't, ignore it altogether. And it says, Biblical commands are very important for us. It's foundational for all of us. So we shouldn't throw it away. It's not about throwing away. Jesus did not throw away it in the Old Testament. He fulfilled it, right? And then some of the people were saying, well, you know what, there is no gap whatsoever. So you should, word by word, letter by letter, and just line by line in original, exactly as it is, you should keep it. Exactly as it is. No gap whatsoever. So it's just smooth, like 3,000 years of difference, and then there's a smooth, there's nothing, no gap whatsoever. Well, that's the issue too, isn't it? It's a black and white. There's no gap whatsoever. So Jesus has confronted some of the people like that in his own time, some Pharisees. Okay, and especially about Sabbath. They were thinking pretty much about there's no gap whatsoever. There's this smooth, and they were just keeping the Ten Commandments and the rest of the commandments from the Old Testament as it was. And as much as possible, they were keeping it. And that's considered them to be the standard of being a righteous and holy person. They kept that, and they challenged other people to keep that exactly as it is. And Jesus comes along and just turns things upside down. Comes along, and then on one Sabbath, he comes along, his disciples came along, and they were kind of hungry, and it was on Sabbath. And there was a grain field, and they were walking by a grain field, and they just grazed a little bit. And also ripe for picking. They were hungry, so they just picked a little bit, grazed a little bit, and they ate. And the Pharisees were looking at it from the side, and they were like, look at, okay, that's not right, that's totally wrong, it's on Sabbath. You should not work on Sabbath. Remember what in our scripture reading, you're supposed to, in fourth commandment, isn't it? You shall obey, you shall keep your Sabbath holy by not working. 6 days you work, and the seventh day you rest, just like God has rested the seventh day. Not only yourself, but also you, your entire family should not work. And not only whole entire family, but also those neighbors and your home workers and all your livestock. Nobody works on Sabbath day. You just take a rest. And then they saw disciples of Jesus grazing, working. And they were looking at, you broke the law. That's a huge thing. You broke the law. And they were condemning Jesus' disciples and Jesus as well. So this is how Jesus responded to some of these people. He says, okay. Remember King David? I said, yeah, we remember King David. See? Now what do you say? The King David, and some of his friends were kind of hungry, and they entered into the house of God, and they saw they consecrated bread only for a priest to eat. But they took it and they ate it altogether. Now what do you say to that? Was King David bad? Was he wrong to do that? They could not answer. They could not respond to that. And so Jesus says, you see, Sabbath and all the commandments were made for people, not the other way. So he just rearranged the whole thing. Not keeping as the letter by letter, word by word is one thing, but it's turning things upside down. Rearranged everything. What really matters. And then there's another Sabbath. And Jesus wanted to challenge all those Pharisees, so he went into synagogue. And there was this person was sick. He was deeply in need of medical attention, suffering and painful. Somebody need to go over there and to heal and just help him out. But it was on Sabbath. So he asked some of his, those Pharisees, he says, so should we heal this guy who's suffering, who's painful, is hurting? He's probably, I don't know what's going to happen if we don't do anything about this guy. Shall we heal him, save his life, or shall we just leave him alone so that we don't break the law? What's an awful thing to do? That's what he's responded. He's challenged the Pharisees. And they didn't say anything. So whenever they get stuck, they don't say anything. Okay. And they didn't respond anything. And Jesus was quite disappointed. And so he healed. He healed the man. He showed what it means how to embrace and live out the Ten Commandments. He broke the law, and yet so it's not about how do you embrace and live out the Ten Commandments and the rest of biblical teachings. How do you do that? It's not about what's right or wrong. It's not about what's true or false. It's not about what shall I do, what shouldn't I do, but it's about what matters the most. It's about rearranging, reprioritizing everything. And in turn, Jesus went around doing that all the time. Just turning things inside out. Showing what it means to embrace and live out God's commandment. Now, next one, please. Next one. Yeah, good. So my way of understanding how Jesus, this is how I kind of try to summarize how Jesus tried to embrace and live out and show people how to live out God's kingdom and God's commandments in his life. And he showed in many different ways. And my understanding too, in one way of understanding, keep it simplex. Keep it simplex. That's how Jesus. Simplex means next one. Simple and complex. First of all, you have to understand, you have the biblical teachings and commandments and 10 commandments, all the teachings are very simple to understand. Next one. It's simple, it's not complicated. It is not complicated. Biblical commandments are very simple to understand. You don't have to be biblical scholar to understand biblical teachings and commandments. They are very plainly laid out for us to understand. You don't have the IQ of over 130 to understand what it means. You don't have to minister to understand what it means. We all understand what it means. It's laid out. It's not a puzzle, it's not a mystery, there's no secret behind it. When people come to you and says, there's a secret that I want to tell you, then just disregard this person. Because even Jesus, when he put it together, it was very simple things to understand. We make it complicated. I mean, what's so complicated and difficult to understand about 10 commandments? For example, let me give you first 3 commandments. God says, I am God, your God. There is no other God. Don't put any other God before me. Do not make any idol. Which means, in other words, do not cheat on me. That's what God is saying. First, idolatry. Do not cheat on me. You should only love me, worship me, squeeze me only. Remember that? Several days ago I brought you this thing? Okay, it's okay. It's all good. So God says, you worship me only. That's very clear to understand. Of course, some of the people say, I love God and then I love my money. Okay, well, it's up to you to do that, but it's really simple to understand, isn't it? No idolatry. And then God says in the 7th commandment, God says, do not commit adultery. Right? In other words, what? Don't cheat on your spouse. That's what it really comes down to. Isn't it? What's so hard to understand? Of course, but you could, hold on to one person and looking at the other person. That's up to you to do that. But there's nothing, no misunderstanding, no confusion, nothing complicated about understanding what it means, isn't it? It's simple to lay it out. Truth is very simple. And God's commandments are very simple to understand, sometimes make it very complicated. I mean, what was so hard for Adam to understand God's commandment? Just one command, God says, or 2 commands, God says, you can do anything you want, you can eat anything you want, except one thing, do not eat any fruits from that tree, God said. Is that hard to understand? Simple. And God comes along and says, Adam, why did you eat fruit from that tree? What part of the commandment did you not understand? I told you not to eat fruit from that tree. And Adam goes, oh God, I'm sorry, I thought you meant fruit from this tree, not that tree. I was confused, God. Adam was kicked out of Garden of Eden, not because he was sinful, because he was totally confused. Truth is very simple for us to understand. It's not hard. What's so hard about understanding love your God? Love your neighbor as yourself. It's simple truth. But we make it complicated. This is what happens. Next one, please. This is what happens to us. We make it this calm. And we call this truth. Tangle, next one. Now that's what happens. When we get all tangled, and next one, and the next one, yeah, what is it? What do you mean it can't work? Is there another guy? There's no other guy. What we have here is just too complicated. But that's the God. Next one. If you can't explain it simply, you don't understand well enough. Very shy, isn't it? I mean, it's very, very simple to understand. That's how Jesus interpreted and lived out. Simple. But on the other hand, the Pharisees tried to complicate things. Hard to understand. Next one. Making the simple complicated is commonplace. Making the complicated simple, awesomely simple, that's creativity. And Jesus was a master at making things very simple. Truth is not complicated, folks. When people come and tell you there's secret behind it, don't believe it. Truth is simple. Simple to understand. And yet, next one, it's complex. Simple to understand, but it's complex to live out. It's complex in a sense that there are many different layers. It's rich in its meaning. Complex in a way there's multiple ways of living out. Complex in a way that it's okay to live out one way or the other. Complex in a way that's a wider ways of understanding. Each deep is creative, it's rich, it's diverse, it's multiplicity. Asking, what could I do? And that's how Jesus lived out. The Bible is not, to embracing and living out God's commandment is not about, and Bible is not about, there's 7 steps of embracing living out Sabbath and all the commandments. There's no such thing as 7 steps. And people will tell you, as long as you do 7 steps, from 1 step to 7 step, you'll be just great, perfect. No, there is no such thing as any step. It's not like Alcoholics Anonymous. There's 12 steps from here to there. Once you do that, you become master. No, there's no such thing. It's multiple layers after layers of embracing and living out God's commandment. The Bible, some people think the Bible is some kind of a dummy's guide to be saved. Like some instructional manual to how to improve your relationship. If you apply this biblical principle, you'll become rich, Things like that. It's not what it is, folks. It's not linear. It's not like you go from here to there, you'll be just perfect. No, it's not. It's not linear. If you go step by step, you'll be okay. There's no steps. You could have your own step, but doesn't apply to everybody else. It's how to embrace and live out your commandments, the Sabbath and commandment, all the biblical teaching is really all about, it's an art form. Next one. It is an art form. Keeping it simplex is an art form. It's not a mechanical form. It's not science. It is an art form. There's no such thing as a mechanics or science of embracing, living out God's commandment in your life. It's an art of living out, art of embracing God's commandment in 21st century. It's about art. When you put anything, any endeavors to a higher plane, you elevate to higher plane, it becomes art. Not science anymore. It's not techniques, it's not about mechanics. It becomes an art form. As simple as art, as complex as art, when we embrace how we embrace. It's about, that's why we call this, there's no such thing as, there's no such thing as, there are a lot of parents who are reading books about how to do parenting nowadays. Well, techniques. But actually it's about art and spirituality of parenting, isn't it? It's about art and spirituality of grandparenting, isn't it? It's art and spirituality of gardening. We don't talk about just techniques. We go beyond that. When you put elevate to higher level, it becomes art. Because art and spirituality of faith, art and spirituality of ministry, art of making music, not just techniques. Everything becomes art. Even combat sports becomes art. Some of you probably know that I have a black belt in Taekwondo. Did you know that? Some of you, did you know that?
Yeah.
I gained my third degree black belt when I was 20-something. My brother is a Canadian Olympic coach for many years. And so whenever I go to Edmonton in his school, and everybody bows down to me. That's what you do. So I did many competitions when I was quite younger. I learned, I mastered every techniques known at the time. Skills and techniques and forms, and then I've done all the techniques there is to actually gain the black belt. That's what you get black belt, is you master every techniques and every skills possible. But after black belt, after you to get to a second and third and fourth and fifth degree, it's not about learning. It's not about mastering skills anymore. It becomes mastering yourself. It's not about competition anymore. If it's anything to do with a competition, it's about competing with yourself. And so later on, it becomes, you're not a technician anymore, but it's much more about artist. You become a martial artist. That's why people in different, actually really achieve a higher degree. They don't talk about competition. They don't talk about hitting people. They talk about mastering themselves.